5 seconds. So we are online. If you want to introduce yourself a little bit, and then you can go with your presentation. It's your show now. I'm going mute. You take over.
Yeah.
Please, you can start your introduction.
Okay. When I was stuck. The mediation is one of a number of forms of alternative disputed resolution. It is essentially the least formal and most flexible form of HER and the release on the mediator, facilitating discussions between the disputing parties in order to assist them in reaching their own resolution. This is intended to be a fast-track process of reaching a resolution which is generally achieved through a combination of joint and separate sessions with the parties, where the mediator helps both sides to define the issues clearly, understand each other's position, and move closer to resolution. It is important, more important to recognize from the outset that unlike in arbitration proceedings, mediation is non-binding unless and until parties agree on a resolution, and the mediator has no authority to decide the settlement or even compel the parties to settle. The impact and the application of basic principles of mediation will, however, differ from one culture to another, and what may appear to be the norm in one society may be the opposite or the opposite elsewhere. Consideration must be given as to whether mediation is a viable option and how and when I could be appropriate. In the Middle East, there is a rich tradition of and strong cultural and religious respects for parties to amicably settle differences by seeing a compromise and finding a mechanism to settle matters with minimal adversarial feeling. Similarly, there is no loss of faith if in the early stages of a dispute, parties come together to settle issues, to maintain good relations and keep a project on schedule. These circumstances should therefore provide the perfect basis of the provision of mediation services, which by definition are natural, non-binding until such times as a commitment and through facilitations provide the parties with an opportunity to find a satisfactory resolution to their issues. A key element to the successful conclusion of a mediation process is that the representatives are fully authorized to settle by their respective parties. Therefore, the selection of mediation as suitable medium for dispute resolution needs to consider the following issues, which have been prevalent in the Middle East for some time. It is the norm for standard published contract documents to be amended to the extent that the authority for issuing instructions or making discussions is restricted, such that project managers and engineers may often be referred to as paper tigers, having no real power to enforce their instructions or discussions. Likewise, in common contract terminology may also have no discussion making capability and only represent the employer in an observed capacity. Governmental bodies and large developers habitually retain discussion-making authority at a high level. Comparative rigidity of large organization evidenced by inflexible and complex procedures and reluctance of employees to step outside their comfort zones with regards to discussion making, innovation, and embracing a large picture. Face is extremely important, and therefore many individuals would rather ignore a potentially embarrassing situation or push it elsewhere rather than address the matter and be seen to be wrong or perceived to have made a wrong discussion. It is therefore somewhere or somewhat unlikely that mediation in its first form would succeed in the Middle East, where one of the parties is a governmental body or a large recognized developer. How then can mediation become a viable process in such an environmental and what consideration should be taken into account to enhance its prospects of success? Concentrating on the construction industry, it is necessary to look at the other common areas of dispute particular to the Middle East market and consider whether such disputes would be serious contenders for the mediation process. The following have been identified: contracts between building contractors and their subcontractors, suppliers, or consultants; contracts between lead consultants and their various subconsultants; contracts where there is an established bond between parties. For example, some developers have strong preferences for working with particular contractors or consultants. It is not being suggested that the foregoing would not also, in some cases, be subject to certain levels of the same rigidity and strict process as the governmental bodies and large-scale developers identified above, but it is considered that smaller parties and compares with greater flexibility to operate would consider the mediation alternative for a number of reasons, several of which have been identified as follows. Cost: there is a general absence of the small claims court in the United Arab Emirates, and therefore contracts disputes generally proceed initially through arbitration. In fact, many standard contracts in the UAE refer disputes directly to arbitration or other forms of dispute resolution. Example, the FIDIC subconsultancy agreement in 1992, reprinted in 1998, refers to arbitration, and the FIDIC planned and designed bill 1999 refers entirely to a dispute adjudication board and thereafter arbitration. Other consultancy agreements refer solely to compliance with the laws of their country of origin, and in the cases of sub-consultancies, to the main contract, which under a number of prime developers in the UAE traditionally has only mentioned settlement in good faith or feeling, which referral to arbitration. There is therefore the potential for parties to save significant costs that through entering into a mediation process that will be completed within a matter of days rather than having to entertain an extended process with the inevitable associated cost of lawyers, expert witnesses, and other necessary parties. Time resorting to court action or arbitration can be costly in terms of both time and also the additional parties involved. The fact that mediation can be carried out over a few days means that resources are not distracted from their main functions and the staff disruption is minimized. Relationships. There are many occasions where parties desire to retain relationships and resorting to a formal claims process is perceived to be confrontational and detrimental to ongoing relationships. Mediation can provide such parties with an opportunity to air grievances or problems and seek resolution through a non-confrontational environmental. Mediation in such cases could result in a lead consultant agreeing, extended reserving, or service for a preferred specialized subconsultant or main constructors responding to claims from regular subconstructors on one project by agreeing enhanced rates for them on another project. The questions then arise as to why such smaller parties and companies may still elect to ignore the option of mediation. A number of issues can be readily identified. Cost. The cost factor can again be a significant discussion and decisive factor. For example, the cost of entering into mediation may be disproportionately high when considering the potential outcome or alternatives. The introduction of the small claims tribunal in the UAE means that it may be cheaper for parties now to agree to proceed through the city. There are, however, conditions attached to the ACT process. For example, restrictions on use of lawyers and a financial cap in civil and commercial claims. The cost of filing in the ACT is relatively low and is therefore a further consideration in deciding whether or not to consider mediation or arbitration. Time, there must be a well-resolved the dispute, but unfortunately, this is not always the case for all parties, and the instruction of mediation is then perceived as the employment of delay tactics and the time wasting to further prevent reaching a quick resolution. Strengths of the case. Parties are unlikely to enter mediation where they believe that they have a watertight case, and mediation could only result in a weakening of their position. In such instances, the parties must first consider to what extent their position is truly watertight. Example are both or probably instructed, have fees been agreed, was approval given to proceed to the next design stage, what was the basis of post-contract staffing. Example, resources in place or lump sum fee for deliverables or delivers. How has change been recorded? Parties already engaged to litigation, it is not uncommon for parties who have already commenced formal or proceedings in court to have settled their dispute before the hearing commences. Many such parties will therefore already be incurring legal fees to their own lawyers, and in addition, fear the risks of possibility also having to pay those of the opposing parties. The obvious questions arising in deciding whether or not to go down the mediation route are: what parameters should they set if they elect to use mediation in order to settle their dispute? At what point in the process do they settle? And does mediation offer real cost savings or cost benefits in comparison to potential negotiation? Lack of enforcement, there is a high instance of late payment in the Middle East. Many employers retain the belief, often well-founded, that the other party will not resort immediately to legal remedies, but will continue to politically requires payment. It is not uncommon for 90 days discussions or on variation accounts or payment terms to become 180 days, or discussions on variation accounts to be postponed and infinitum. Therefore, some parties will not consider mediation, as there remains a strong chance that any mediation agreement will prove extremely hard to enforce. Recognition of available mediators, given that former mediation proceedings are far from commonplace. It is possible also that a reticence to engage in mediation comes from a perception that Middle East is somehow lacking in the required expertise to purpose this form of dispute resolution. Such a presumption is, in my opinion, misplaced, as there are in fact numerous experienced constructions mediators available and accessible through recognized industry bodies such as the Royal Institution of Chartered Savers, RICS, or professional firms who have been operating in the dispute resolution field within the Middle East for many years. In summation, whilst difficulties exist in educating various parties about the merits of mediation and its implementation, there are obvious potential gains to be made through the increased use of mediation within the Middle East construction industry, particularly as mediation really is, although it's also perhaps not fully recognized, an exciting element of the society and culture. Now we will talk about war, peace, and mediation in the Middle East. Why knowledge that complexity of a seemingly never-ending conflict. Then the parties and the Six-Day War, the second section analyzed the period from the point until that in 1993, although accords, the third section finally goes from Oslo until the present day based on his observations. The author concludes that most probably no signal method will solve the situation and points out the immense costs bound for any person or organization that presents itself as a mediator. Middle East or a mediation desert that the Arab practices of musalaha recognition recognition and sulh settlement have been used to resolve disputes in the Middle East for centuries. These parties take place within a communal framework where discussion and mutual agreement are highly prized over confrontation and adversation in relationships. As such, it could be said that the Middle East has a strong heritage in resolving disputes by alternative dispute resolution. Nevertheless, it is commonly claimed that the dispute this positive historical and cultural background, few commercial mediation take place, and the Middle East is a mediation desert. This article explores primarily from United Arab Emirates representative whether such claims have merit and what the future might hold for mediation in the region. Ritual reluctance to mediation in the Middle East, while the advantages and disadvantages of litigation and arbitration are reasonably well understood in the region, it is not often the case in respect of mediation. As a result, mediation is used less than it might be otherwise. Mediation has a very high success rate. It is a quick and relatively expensive process compared to litigation or arbitration. The average mediation will last 1 or 2 days in the minority of cases that don't settle at mediation or thereafter. The mediation process can help to narrow the number of issues in dispute between the parties, often saving costs in preparing for litigation or arbitration. Fostering mediation in the Middle East construction industry. Whilst the construction industry worldwide is plagued by disputes, construction disputes in the Middle East have two distinct characteristics. That high value of the disputed and the long time it takes to resolve such disputes. The Architects Global Construction Disputes report in 2019 shows that the global average value of a dispute is established at US $33 million versus an estimated average value of US and $56.7 in the Middle East. Similarly, the global average length of disputes in 17 months is compared to an average length of 20 months in the Middle East. With its attractive characteristics like flexibility, simplicity, short time frame, cost efficiency, mediation can become a favorite alternative dispute resolution in the Middle East construction industry. These objectives can be achieved by well-set plans, collaboration and cooperation between private non-profit organizations and legal bodies. Construction industry is plagued by disputes which arise from the complex nature of the industry and wrong practices. Regardless of the causes, disputes have detrimental impact on the construction industry. The volume and intensity of construction disputes have increased over the last decades of the 20th century. In 1994, the UK government commissioned an investigation committee led by Sir Michael Leather to investigate the procedure problems with the construction industry. Report described the construction sector as ineffective. Arbitration is the oldest and most legally supported ADR against huge property due its cost and time efficiency compared to litigation. Many disputants still prefer arbitration over the other ADR mechanism because of the two characteristics. First, the enforceability of awards, and second, the avoidance of specific legal symptoms and nations' courts. Nonetheless, the latest trends in construction disputes indicate that arbitration popularity may be diminishing. Arcadent's global construction disputes in 2019 shows that mediation is now the second most used ADR after party-to-party negotiations, while education occupies the third most used ADR. This could be attributed to the unsatisfactory time and the cost efficiency of arbitration, arbitration being more time and cost efficient than litigation. Mediation is not an alien ADR to the Middle East construction industry, but still underutilized. Pushing mediation forward will allow the region's construction industry to further benefit from the attractive values mediation can offer. Achieving this goal requires collaboration and cooperation between the government's non-profit organization and other relevant institutions. The ultimate objective is to address the factors that may hamper the use of mediation. Such factors may include included lack of supportive legislations, lack of awareness, lack of trained mediation or mediators, lack of organized mediation bodies, etc. The benefits of ADR are recognized and explored within all jurisdictions in the Middle East. However, mediation doesn't receive the same legal attention of arbitration. For example, additionally, only very few countries in the Middle East have signed the UN Convention on International Settlement Agreements resulting from mediation. In comparison, very few countries have not signed the United Nations in 1958 in New York Convention on the Recognition and Enforcement of Foreign Arbitral Awards. Success of mediation depends on the qualification of mediator, training in mediation or mediators is provided by few reputable international organization, included the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. And the Central for Effective Dispute Resolution Mediation Services are offered by this international organization, local ADR construction, and some of private legal firms. Institution in each country can play a major role in promoting mediation through improving the mediation divisions within the instruction, organization awareness, competence, and seamless and enhancing collaboration and integration of services with the international organization and the private entities. The advantages of the mediation are not fully explored and recognized in the Middle East, particularly in the construction industry. This can be attributed to many factors, included lack of awareness and consumption of the process. The local alternative dispute resolution organization and the government can play a major role in fostering mediation. If enough efforts are put by relevant bodies, popularity of mediation in the Middle East construction industry can be improved and can match those levels of the developed. Mediation religious beliefs and traditions are also relevant to conflict control and reduction, including the relevant resources in Islamic law and tradition. Different causes and types of conflicts, family, community, and state conflicts need to be considered as do intuitive techniques and procedures such as wasata, which mean mediators, but recognize mediation and tahkim, arbitration, the rituals of sulh, settlement, and musalaha, recognition are express of Arab Islamic culture and values, and should be looked at for insight into how to approach conflict resolution in the Middle East. Finally, there is the need to consider the implications of these issues and insights for practitioners and policymakers. To what extent is an integration of Western and non-Western models of conflict reduction and recognition possible? This paper looks first at Western and non-Western approaches to conflict resolution and points to important cultural differences in approaching conflict management, including the role of the individual and society attitudes towards the conflict styles of communication. Expectations of mediators, understanding concerning victimization and forgiveness, and the usefulness of governmental and or non-governmental programs and institutions such as truth commissions for nations recognition. The second section considers that geographical and culture influences on the Arab Middle East. It highlights the importance of relationships based on family, patriarchal, and gender, kindship, and Islamism, clientism, and points to the continuing underlying code of honor and its counterpart chain in conflict and conflict management. Mediation about Lebanon. mediation, historical forms of mediation in Lebanon until September 24, 2018. Lebanon didn't have a mediation law per se. Historically, however, similar concepts existed by what is now as Sheikh Soloh, a Nobel title, bestowed onto a reputable person whose role it was to help parties find a solution for their differences. If the parties failed, the Sheikh Soloh would provide a binding award, a concept similar to the modern Mid-Arab. After obtaining independence from the Ottoman Empire, Lebanon recognized the concept of settlement and conciliation through its contract and civil procedure law. The modern form of mediation was introduced in Lebanon through the Center Professional de Mediation (CPM) at St. Joseph University, one of the oldest and reputable universities in Lebanon. The CPM was established in 2005 as a mediation center and training academy. Its purpose is to promote the concept of mediation in Lebanon and the region. In 2012, another mediation center was established at the Beirut Chamber of Commerce with the support of the International Finance Corporation, a member of the World Bank Group. The Judicial Mediation Law of 2018, on September 24, 2018, the Lebanese Parliament passed the Judicial Mediation Law. This law is set to go into effect 6 months from the date of publication. The law provides the opportunity for parties in conflict to choose mediation as an alternative dispute resolution. This method requires that agreement or the agreement of all parties to the conflict. The duration of the mediation is 30 working days with an option to renew for an additional 30 days upon the approval of all parties. Based on the parties' agreement, the court may designate a mediation center. If the parties fail to agree on one, the mediation center has to be registered with the Ministry of Justice. During the 6 months from the date of the law's publications and the date the law goes into effect, the Ministry of Justice shall define the criteria for the establishment of the mediation centers. Also, during the same period, a list of those accredited centers shall be published. And in light of the crisis and in the light of the crisis in Lebanon and the causes of the crisis, from the demonstrations and protests that were, as long as the protest movement remains leaderless, it will be hard for the outside community to endorse measures such as the resignation of the government because they would be afraid of chaos and political and security vacuum. And as long as the protests are leaderless, there will be a greater likelihood of political opportunists intervening and trying to ride this wave of legitimacy. and non-participant demands. There was a need for a mediator group to be formed, composed. There was a need for a mediator group to be formed, composed of respected non-partisan Lebanese justice or judges to be for the or behind the Lebanese judges, constitutional lawyers, and the economic experts. This is a crisis that should be settled by the Lebanese among themselves. This mediator group could engage in shuttle diplomacy between the government and the different leadership. Notes of the protest movement to identify a common group or a common ground of shared principles for a solution to be followed by confidence building. Measures that can be engaged or enacted simultaneously by both sides, leading to the launch of the negotiation process about the transition period. Thanks all for me about the mediation in the Middle East. I would like to thank you all. That's
Thank you, Lama.
why I consider.
Thank you very much. It was very nice. And I don't know why you were worried about your presentation, but you haven't introduced yourself. First, please tell us about yourself.
Yeah.
You want to tell us about yourself, what you're doing?
My name is Hello for All First. My name is Lama Audi from Lebanon, Middle East. And I studied master's in international law at Lebanese University, and studied some courses of interior design and no Italian, English, and some of the French. And I talented in drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I work as a Palestinian jurist in the Sidon region, Lebanon. I'm interested in the subject of mediation, and I attended many seminars related to it. Today, and what?
Okay, basically, Giovanni had one question for you. I asked Joya to ask you in Arabic, but I'll read it out in English also. Lebanon is at the crossroad of different cultures, religions, and now, unfortunately, conflicts. How much room there is for mediation in contemporary Lebanon? Please, Joya.
Sure. لما عم بيسألك جيوفاني إنه لبنان هلا على مفترق طرق بين الثقافات، بين الأديان، وللأسف كمان بين المشاكل. بقى مشان هيك عم بيسألك إنه قديش بتلاقي إنه في غرفة أو في مساحة كرمال الميدياسيون بلبنان المعاصر اللي نحن عم نعيشه هلا، بظل كل هيدي المشاكل والثقافات والمفترق الطرق اللي نحن فيها.
You can answer in Arabic, no problem.
No. I don't know, but I don't find it's easy to find the mediators in Lebanon because it's smaller parties, I think.
But I'm saying you can always answer in Arabic. Joya is sitting there. She will help you as much as she can. So anything more than that you want to tell us?
يعني على ما أعتقد أنه في لبنان يعني لا يوجد الكثير أو لا يوجد هناك الكثير من مساحة للوساطة إنه لحد الآن يعني بسبب عدة أمور.
لما طب بدك تقولي شو هن هدول الأمور وأنا بترجم بالآخر. I'm asking Lama to say, Lama is basically saying that in Lebanon there is no much room for mediation, unfortunately, for several reasons. So I asked her to cite those reasons before I can translate the whole thing.
Yeah.
No, I think because إنه هي بتتعارض مع يعني الناس بتخاف منها لأنه بالعادة بتتعارض مع القضاء وبيروحوا دغري للقضاء بسبب عدة أمور مشاكل، ما بحبوا إنه يكون طرف ثالث بيناتهم. وأساساً الطرف الثالث بفضلوه يكون بالعادة عبر القضاء. يعني I think for that.
So Lama is saying that basically the mediation culture is not really flourished in Lebanon because usually the parties who might go into mediation tend not to do that. They tend to go directly to court because they don't like, as in the general culture, to have a third party interfere between them. So this is part of the culture. This is what Lama thinks gets in the way of having a flourished mediation culture in Lebanon. I have a different take on this, but I will let her finish. إذا بدك بعد تقولي شيء أنا ready كمان ترجم لك.
No, I finished up.
Okay.
Yes, Joya, your version, your part.
Okay, so for me, I just wanted to say to Giovanni. So basically, Giovanni, Lebanon has a huge legacy of war and conflict. We have went through many civil wars. We have had aggressions. We have had invasions. We have internal disputes. We are a country that's formed by 18 different sects. So the culture of mediation in and by itself is rooted and ingrained in our communities. There are always initiatives for mediation, whether they are intercommunal or whether they are interreligious or whether they are political. During the civil war, mediation, and this is what I will be speaking about in my intervention at the end of the month in September. During the civil war, mediation played a really key role in order to prevent mass atrocities, genocides, and war against humanity to occur in Lebanon. So it was always there precisely because of conflict, not despite of it. So it was more of a byproduct of conflict that we had mediation present in our country. But you know, if your question means mediation in a private sense, it is flourishing. It is flourishing more and more every day. Now we have a room at the advocates bar. So I'm sorry, the lawyers association, we call it the lawyers association in Beirut. So basically they have a room for mediation. Now it's flourishing. I got to work a bit on mediation in the north of Lebanon. Usually we have a huge decentralization problem in Lebanon. So if you have something that's in Beirut, you usually don't have it in other provinces because there's a decentralization problem. But in mediation, in the case of mediation, there was a room in the North Bar for lawyers where mediation occurred for cases related to family violence, children in the context of violence or under danger. So they were able to work on mediation on those cases. And it's a baby steps thing. But Lebanon is more tainted with the sense of mediation when it comes to political conflicts, humanitarian conflicts. This is where mediation played a huge role in our history. And I will be getting, I will be describing this and saying a lot about it in my intervention. Hopefully.
I really liked when Lama said Sheikh Sulah. There's a Sheikh Sulah concept. I really like that.
Yeah, she's right. She's absolutely right. So there's a Sheikh Salah. It's basically the same thing for every religion in Lebanon, every sect we have. We have a key religious figure that takes on himself because of history, because either sometimes they come from a certain family, sometimes it's a tribal thing, so that they take it upon themselves to solve these issues and to play as the mediator between either religions or within the same community between families and tribes. And this is what we saw very recently. I'm going to give you a brief example. So 2-3 weeks ago, we had escalated conflicts in an area in the south of Beirut. So this area is mainly dominated by tribes, and they are Arab tribes. So they have an own communal committee for them, and the head of this communal committee plays as a key mediator between all these tribes. So people from these tribes they have political affiliations to a certain party in Lebanon, others have an affiliation to another, and a spark enlightened an entire conflict. Shootings occurred for 2-3 days, there were many dead, and this person played the role of a mediator to stop the conflict at a certain point and say enough bloodshed. We can't do this anymore. We're part of a communal tribunal committee. We have to sit together and discuss how we can solve this. So this is an example of what happens on a daily basis. Unfortunately, it's a daily basis. So Yeah,
But are
I
these
hope this answers
people,
the question.
but are these people actually doing mediation, or do they have the authority in some way where they have to either put social pressure or whatever other way that they can ask them to stop the conflict, resolve the conflict?
Okay, I'm going to tell you something quite honestly, and I've been thinking about this when I was thinking about my intervention. Mediation in Lebanon has always been there, but has not been there formally. So these people are not formal mediators, unfortunately, but they are mediators in their being, in their reason, in their sense of responsibility to their communities. They are mediators because they think if I don't step in and try to solve this, try to bring the two parties together, there will be more bloodshed. So it's kind of something imposed on them, morally imposed on them, this role of being a mediator. They are not formal ones, but they are usually attributed this position or this responsibility from their communities. So they also have some sense of responsibility conferred to them from their communities. They're not self-appointed mediators, no. There should be a consensus on them from the community.
No, but actually, that is the way I am looking at it, that these people who are out there in communities who are actually doing it, and they take it, like you said, as their responsibility. They have everything within themselves to do it. These are the people we have to bring out, and they are the ones, I think, who need to be available to people all the time, and they should take it as a profession. These are the people whom we need, not people who might just say that, okay, we'll do some training and be mediators. But what does Lama think about this aspect, that how to develop that culture of mediation and how to take it forward? You want to ask her?
Yeah, sure. لما عم بيسألك فيكرم إذا أنت شو رأيك بهيدا الثقافة تبع الوساطة، وكيف برأيك لازم ندفشها لقدام، كيف لازم تتغير، كيف لازم تتحسن بلبنان؟
بظن انه لازم تتحسن عبر انه ينوجد وسطاء داخل لبنان ويكون لهم مكان، يعني كان بالشركات او على كافه الصعد، وهن يعني يكونوا هن اللي عارضين حالهم لهيدا الموضوع، لانه غير هيك ما بحس انه حيكون لهم، يعني حيكون لهم مجال، لانه ما بحس انه حتى في دعايه كافيه لهم. يعني هلا معظم الناس اليوم حتى اللي من جيلنا اذا بتساليهم وساطه بيقولوا لك شو يعني.
Lama is saying that بدك بعد تقولي شيء؟ Okay. So Lama is saying that there should be more of a pushed advertisement for mediators in the community, and especially within the younger generations. They need to know more about what a mediator is so that they can engage in this new set of conflict resolution that we're trying to introduce in our country. She's also saying that there should be more appointed mediators in different provinces or departments so that people can get more access to them and easier access to them, so that maybe this way we can ingrain the sense of mediation in our conflicts on a wider scale, whether it's formally or informally, so that we don't put it in an informal scene.
But what is it like with young people like you? How are you looking at the whole concept of conflict resolution? You want to ask her, and you also, both of you can just answer.
Yeah, I'll
that
ask her
part.
first.
Yeah.
لما عم بيسأل فيكرم إنه شو رأيك أنت بصفتك شابة صغيرة، إنه كيف بيلعب الوساطة دور بحياتك هلا وقد إيه بتلاقي لها أهمية؟
الصراحة لها أهمية كتير كبيرة، لأنه بتتجنبني أني أروح على القضاء بأقل الأمور أو بأمور يمكن ما تكون حرزانة، فأكيد بتلعب أهمية كتير كبيرة بحل المشاكل اللي كان اليومية البسيطة أو حتى الكبيرة. ممكن كتير إنه يعني تجنب أمور كتير كبيرة من خلالها.
So Vikram, Lama is saying that it plays a huge role in her life because she thinks that this way mediation prevents her from going to court and from engaging with all these legal proceedings that are sometimes too entangled. So she thinks this is better for solving minor issues or getting things done in an easier and more comfortable setting.
And now your view on this, on the younger people, how are you looking at this whole thing? I'm
I'm
putting you under the younger category, okay? I'm putting you in the younger category.
It's fine, I'm okay with that. This is also something I'm going to be speaking about in my intervention. I want to speak about how us, being the youth of this category, the new generations, are taking part in the generations of something called post-conflict, post-war, something related to the revolution in the Arab Spring. These terminologies, if you heard them, in the Middle East and the MENA region. We are this unit that's trying to ingrain all the values of mediation in our social fabric of our communities. So for me personally, and I speak also for, because I'm very engaged, I was very engaged with everything related to
Joya?
Yeah, I got a little, I think.
Maybe the internet or the...
Yeah, I think he'll come back. She'll come back. But what you have to do, Lama, is also, because you're part of the Palestinian Jurists Association, maybe you can talk about mediation in the Israel-Palestine conflict also. Maybe you can, up to the time she comes back, maybe you can tell us that. You want to?
الوساطة, but in Arabic, okay.
In Arabic, then we'll have to wait for Joya.
Yes,
Joya, you look there?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
Sorry, it was internet cut. So I was basically saying that we need to ingrain the values of mediation in our social fabric, and this is what we always try to do. I will be speaking more about this, so I don't want to be laying out.
Okay.
It's
So
a huge role as youth.
Yes.
It has a huge role.
Okay, so now what I asked Lama is, because Lama is part of the Palestinian Jurists Association there. So what is her view on mediation in the Israel-Palestine conflict, and what can be done there? She wants to speak in.
Very interesting question.
بالعادة الوساطة عند اللاجئين بلبنان. الوساطة
عم بسألك عن إذا فيك تسألي.
Do you want to? I think your voice cracked. Do you want to shut your video off? Do you want to put your video off and then maybe try? Your video, you're in slow motion mode. Should I stop your video?
Okay.
I'll ask her to stop her video. Yes, I think it might be better now, Joya.
Okay, so لما فيكرم كان عم يسألك إنه إذا أنت شو رأيك بالوساطة بين إسرائيل وفلسطين، هي أول سؤال، وإذا أنت بتحبي تحكي عن شغلك مع اللاجئين الفلسطينيين، كيف عم بتفوت الوساطة بهذا الموضوع وشو بتعملي تحديداً؟
هلا الوساطة بيناتهم بين فلسطين وإسرائيل هلا صراحة حساسة شوي بالوطن العربي، لأنه انسأل هيك سؤال، ولكن إنه نوعاً ما إلى حد ما ممكن تكون إيجابية، يعني لحل بعض الأمور اللي لابد منها، يعني بما إنه هن أرض يعني انفرض عليهم، يعني مثل شيء أمر واقع، فممكن إنه تسهل بعض الأمور يعني. ولكن بخصوص شغلي أنا بيناتهم صراحة هن مش كثير، يعني الوساطة عندهم هي ممكن تكون عبر شخص ثالث، بس بأمور كثير بسيطة لحتى يتجنبوا كونهم خاصة بين اللاجئين، ليتجنبوا أمور قضائية وأمور كثير يعني ممكن تكون صعبة عليهم يوصلوا له وتحل وكذا، كثير بيلجأوا للوساطة. ولكن يعني بمفهوم مبطن هي وساطة، يعني مش إنه دايركت إنه هيدي وساطة، ولكن أغلب الأمور اللي بنعيشها بمفهوم مبطن بتكون هي وساطة. هلا أنا شغلي بيناتهم، أنا يعني مسؤولة الحقوقيين الفلسطينيين اللاجئين فقط في منطقة صيدا، بحيث أنه مندافع عن حقوقهم ناحية بناء مثلا، عمار، تملك، يعني تملك أكيد مش إنه مناطق شاسعة، يعني حد أدنى، بس إنه سبل العيش، بس هيدي هي الأمور بمعظم الحالات يعني اللي بناخدها.
Okay, أترجم. Vikram, so basically Lama is saying, first, for the part related to the mediation between Israel and Palestine, she thinks that this does not have really fertile roots in the Arab world. This is not a welcomed idea generally, but she thinks that it could possibly be an opportunity for to have positive outcomes if it is done on like a minor scale, if we agree on minor things throughout this mediation. But for sure, it needs a consensus between two communities, two people, so that it can flourish and proceed with positive outcomes. This is for the first part of the question. For the second, related to her work with the Palestinian community, she's saying that she's responsible for all the Palestine jurists that from the Palestinian community that live in Saida. Saida is an area in the south of Beirut, in the south of Lebanon even. So she's saying that she alongside them work on promoting Palestinian rights, their human rights, their property rights, as much as they can within the limits of and boundaries of national legislation. She thinks that mediation also plays a role whenever she works with them in minor issues related to their day-to-day lives. Sometimes they're not aware that this is mediation, but it is mediation. So this is why she thinks it's important and they need it on a daily basis to solve their issues.
But do you think, Joya, in terms of communication or dialogue or conversations between the people from Palestine and Israel with the youth, I'm saying with the youth, start that conversation. Do you think that is going to help and not wait for the political parties or the people, stakeholders there to get in?
Listen, Vikram, I share a lot from what Lama said regarding the need for our communities and our people to be ready to take that step, because there's a history that is suffocated with bloodshed and with crime. So from both sides, of course. So this is why they need to come to terms. There should be a reconciliation with their history, a reconciliation with the war, in order for them to take a step and say, okay, we need to open a new page. And the way we're going to open this new page is by proceeding with mediation talks so that we can resolve this conflict. But this you need to get over intergenerational trauma from two communities, from two countries. And this usually takes a lot of time. So we're waiting. We don't want to push anything, but for sure, the youth community all over the world, we tend to go towards being global citizens. And by being global citizens, we mean that we tend towards peace. We tend towards peace talks. We're tired of conflict. And precisely in the Arab world, we as youth are tired of inheriting conflicts we did not take part in. We're tired of that. So this is why of course, there's a lot of, I mean, from the communities, from the scene that I hear in the country, there are a lot of talks about peace, because and a human's natural state of being is always wanting to peace, always merging and tending to go towards peace. We don't usually tend to go towards evil or crime or violence or conflict. So hopefully in the future, yeah, but it needs a lot of work. Personal, interpersonal, intercommunal, and social work.
Yeah. Because my little bit of a worry is that because there was some people who wanted to or did back out also, because there were people from Israel in the symposium. So I was telling them, look, as mediators, if you people also do not come forward and have those conversations, then what hope do we have? So I can understand they had their pressure. There were some people from Tunisia who were supposed to be there, and they backed out, saying that people from Israel are there. So I'm just saying that is there some way that we can convince these people that, look, as mediators, I'm saying as mediators, as the youth is also one part. So if there is going to be hesitation in dialogue or conversations, then will we be able to move forward?
I know, Vikram, this is a bit ironic, because you're in a place where we promote the culture of mediation and sitting around at the same table when you have two parties that are in conflict with each other. But I'm very aware of something. And I think the parties from Israel are also the people who wanted to participate are also aware of it. Sometimes you have rules and regulations and laws in your country that force you to act in a certain way, because otherwise you will be punished for it. Sometimes these laws I don't get to control these laws, but I'm under them, so I have to respect them. I'm owned by them, exactly. So this is why I understand when these people tell you, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do about this, I have to retreat, I cannot proceed with this, because they will be sanctions for their actions back in their home country, just like it is the case in mine. But I respect them. I hope that in the future we would always, I never in my head, and personally, as a human being, I'd never want to reach a point where I can say there's no room for dialogue or debate on this issue in any way, in any means, in any reality. I never want to say this. There is always room for dialogue, and I hope we can reach that someday where it's safe, in a safe and secure environment for us and for them.
Well, actually, what you just said is exactly what Reza told me, and that I understood the context, that there are sanctions put on people if they go out and have these conversations or they're part of things which are with them. But I have to thank Lama, because I think she also had that worry initially, but then she's okay with it. Otherwise, she was also had this thing, should I be part of it or not? So
Yes.
at least, so she was okay. So, and why did, yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much for this, but I have to leave in like 2 minutes because I have a meeting. I already postponed 20 minutes. So
perfect. No, thank you very much, Joya. I mean, obviously, it's always nice to meet you, but please do come in for other sessions. And of course, Lama wants to thank you for sure. Lama, you want to thank Joya?
Thank you, Joya, a lot, because you supported me a lot.
Thank you so much, and it was great meeting you. Also for Giovanni and Reza. Sorry, maybe we could have a further up discussion later on, but thank you.
Yeah, do drop in for the sessions, okay, Joya? Do drop in for the sessions.
On the 22nd of September.
Before that also, please land up for other sessions.
Hopefully. Yeah.
All right. Bye. Thanks a lot. Bye. So, Lama, anything else that you want to add to that? Because I'm just saying that if mediators do not come forward and have conversations with people from all over the world, then I'm telling you, we don't have hope. What do you say?
Yeah, but صراحة the mediation in the Middle East was a few, and it's poor now. Because the mediators, also number of mediators are few, not it's very big.
No, like I said, we have to bring them out from the communities. I like whatever it. I like that Sheikh Sulah. I like that word. I like that word. We have to bring Sheikh Sulah. I won't be able to pronounce it exactly the same way, but I am really happy that they exist somewhere. We just have to bring them out. So anyway, so thank you, Lama. It was very nice. Your presentation was excellent, and never worry about presentations. You're doing perfectly well. And
I don't think that, because I was more stressful.
No. But I'll tell you one thing interesting about, you picked up the construction industry. Now, the point is that there is a certain culture that develops in certain industries. So in terms of the construction industry, I did a little webinar with some people from the they were chartered surveyors. And I was talking about development of mediation, and someone there actually got motivated in a particular project, did mediation and did it successfully. Not a lawyer, just a chartered surveyor. So there is a lot of hope if the culture is developed, because largely they go into arbitration. But if we can develop that culture, there is a lot of work, a lot of hope there. So perfect, Lama. Thank you very much. I'll just end the session here. We can obviously continue our discussion after this. I'll just end it here. Thank you. And Raza and Giovanni, if you want to, from your side, thank Lama, please. Anyway. Yeah.